Right, good to record. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another mini workshop for the Create-a-thon. In this workshop, we are going to be learning about pathway selection and leveraging location in your stories. And the person who's going to be running this today is our lovely head of community, Tim Souza. Tim, please take it away.
Awesome. Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Emily. Hey, friends, I would really love to chat with everybody about what it looks like to choose different uh, pathways along your story. And so, how do we, how do you choose one street corner over another? Why look at a piece of art? How are we crossing streets? How are we keeping people safe? That's kind of where we're going to be headed today. Without further ado, locations. We want to make sure that the locations that we are choosing are iconic, for lack of better words, places that people are going to remember. You don't want to just choose a random fire hydrant on the street corner that 100 dogs have peed on. You want to choose something interesting, like local street art or a place with a view that, as Emily has talked about in some of our other workshops, that you can anchor people in, that is going to help connect them to the story and not truly break the reality that you are building for them and within your story. And so as we are beginning, you got to begin with the end in mind. And so how are people going to be traversing your story, right? So let's think of a story from like point A to point D, right? You've got a couple stops in between. How are they going to be getting from point A to point D? Where are people, if they're going to be walking, let's just say it's downtown, where are they parking? How far away is point D? And are they going to enjoy the process of getting to point D and enjoy the process of getting back to where they started and parked their car, right? Is it along a biking trail? Are they going to be cycling along the river valley? What does that look like as far as getting the stops along the way? Um, long story short, we're really dealing with people's attention spans, and more so than we are dealing with distance and time. And so what that really kind of boils down to is you're looking at on a branching narrative, which Emily has talked about in one of our other workshops as well. You're going to want to go less distance because people are taking more time and attention at each stop along the way. A linear walking tour can go a little bit further and go a little bit longer at each of those stops. And so as you're choosing your locations, beginning with the end in mind, you want to make sure that you're not sending people, 5 kilometers down a single road, because then they're going to have to come 5 kilometers back. Sometimes choosing paths and locations that kind of arc or loop to create a shorter distance between that last point D and that first point A, right, are something to keep in mind to keep people engaged. And if we're doing a branching narrative, increase their likelihood of going down and choosing another path. So if they spent a like 20 minutes, 30 minutes going down one pathway, they might have the time and the attention span to go down another pathway right then versus coming back down at a later date. And so these are all pieces that I want to keep in mind. That being said, again, fiction versus nonfiction. If people can immediately see themselves in this space and they are going to be taking in verified information on the history of a street in Edmonton, or a history of activities that happen within Chinatown, as an example, then people are going to be a little bit more patient and have a little bit more time for the length as a whole. Now, each stop, we really want to try to target each stop along that point. So point A, point B, point C, and point D in our example should really all individually be about 2 to 3 minutes of time of that engagement. You can stretch that on a nonfiction space to be a little bit longer, about 5 minutes, but I would highly encourage you, because people don't want to be standing on the street with their phone, staring at their phone for more than a couple minutes, right? So really understand that the goal of writing and including voiceover and music is for people to put down their phones, but there'll be a decent period of time where they'll have their phones up in front of them, and you'll want to make sure that they're engaged within their environment in that space. And really, you have a couple minutes to keep their attention before something shiny passes by, or before they walk by the storefront that you really wanted them to walk by and they get distracted and walk in, right? So you got to be able to keep them engaged on the path, but also keep beginning with that end in mind, understanding you pretty much got about an hour of their time if they're committing to um, this timeline. So before I jump into a couple other things, Emily, do you have any questions um, around pathway selection?
Yeah, I mean, so this is a GPS app, right? Like, how does, I don't know, like my GPS doesn't necessarily work all of the time. What are the things that I have to kind of think about with that?
Yeah, so you're definitely going to want to be, when you're choosing location, you're definitely going to want to be giving directions as a part of your writing. And I would heavily refer you to Emily's writing workshop because she dives deeper into that. But you want to anchor people in the locations that you're in. And so as you choose a location, we're just talking about not choosing the fire hydrant, but choosing a beautiful mural. Um, Anchoring that mural and making sure that people know kind of the direction that they're headed. So head north along, um, you know, or I should say, head east along 103rd. And like what, giving them those kind of directions to augment the GPS app. So something to be aware of when it comes to satellite signals. We can do our best to um, engage, like help people get from point A to point B, but we are not TELUS. We do not, we're not Rogers. We can't control those cell signals. And so things that throw that off, buildings, mountains, hills, large structures that can block that signal because it kind of is still a bit of a line of sight piece, are going to be something we want to design our stories around, knowing that there's going to be a little bit of a radius in the selection of that location. And so when you are actually choosing a location via the creator tools, you're going to see that we'll have about a 15-meter radius as a location point. If you're in a very dense downtown space, we'd encourage you to broaden that radius just a little bit, because you're going to want to make sure that just in case the cell signal is being thrown by a building, that people can still open and engage your content, because our content does open up in the location that you're standing. Does it answer your question, Em?
It does. It sounds like you also need to go test these things as well sometimes.
100%. And this is why we highly recommend you get out this weekend and go test your story in the location, especially kind of on that Sunday morning time, where you can go and verify that the story actually opens up where you want it to, knowing that everybody's cell signals work kind of slightly different. And this is another reason to take some friends with you, i.e. your team. Because GPS accuracy is at the whims of the telecom companies. So we want to make sure that we are definitely verifying that. And then I guess the last piece here would be like age. When we talk about age demographics and decision making, knowing who your audience is and where you are taking them is incredibly important. And this kind of is going to bridge into safety as well. Make sure that your paths are having people cross at safe locations, i.e. crosswalks, if they're crossing a street, and try to avoid as many street crossings as possible. So if you know that, again, beginning with the end in mind, that points C and D are on the left side of the street, and you really don't care if you put point B on the left or the right side of the street, my recommendation would be to move and keep people all like walking down the same side of the street rather than crisscrossing across a busy street for people's safety reasons as well. So when we're thinking about location, we also need to think about things like traffic noise and alleyways. So making sure that if there's a beautiful piece of art down an alleyway, making sure that that's a safe alleyway to be in, and that there's not a lot of trucks coming through, or there aren't, someone's not going to get trapped with a street cleaner, coming down an alley while they're exploring that beautiful piece of artwork. Traffic wise, when we're telling stories, when we're engaging the soundscapes of a city, it's not just the sounds and the music that you were writing or the voiceover that people are listening to. They're also going to be having that semi truck, rush by on the road potentially. And so making sure that your soundscape is taking into consideration the built environments that the story is happening in is also incredibly important. Emily, do
And
you
so
have?
that makes sense for mobility pathways then, like some cities will have like bike lanes and things like that that make things safer as a result.
Correct. And so you want to, again, you want to put yourself in the shoes of your user, right? And so at the end of the day, I'm not talking about you as a user. I'm talking about your aunt's best friend who's going to pick up this story and go out for this adventure for the first time. They're going to do it because they want to support you, but they're not going to have the commitment to finish the story if those locations are unsafe, if they are loud, if they are, if you're asking them to walk 3 kilometers, right? Your aunt's best friend will say, "Yes, I totally did it." And I completed the story and it was awesome. Whether that you want them to actually complete that story or not is going to depend on making sure that the locations that you are choosing are just as engaging as the story you're writing itself. Yeah. Does that help answer that question, Em? Awesome. So uh, again, let's talking in location. So grounding people um, in location is super important. So making sure that if you are standing like this, good example is this little doorway here. Um, Finding little pieces in the actual physical world that makes sense for the story and mentioning those and talking about if you're talking about this the sun rising, making sure that you're saying like facing east and then describing what you see within the scene, even if as we mentioned in some other workshops, even if that is a post-apocalyptic scene or a historical scene or a if the city was on a different timeline scene, you do want to have those geographical features that people can anchor themselves in. Um, and also like bringing their attention to that feature as a part of the story. Each stop again is only going to be a couple minutes. You're only really that's about 300 to 500 words in each location, and so as you're doing that, you want to be intentional about your location and truly treat it like a character in your story. And so making sure that you're setting the scene so that the atmosphere, the environment that the person is standing in, they can directly relate to, and it doesn't break that reality too much for them that they're standing within that spot. Again, we've talked about sounds, so making sure that the soundscape that you are designing for that space is cognizant of the already existing soundscape of that built environment that you are building your story in, and you're working to enhance it or shift it to give it a different kind of mood, but not trying to overwhelm the space you're in, because most likely people are just walking in with a pair of AirPods or headphones. They're not going to be coming in with full Adobe sound speakers to experience that that location. So definitely wanting to make sure that you're taking all of that into consideration. Does that lead to any other questions, Em?
Like, do we note weather or anything like that? Like those kind of details that are maybe not physical?
Yeah, I mean, these stories are going to be up 24/7 all year round. And so making sure that as long as it makes sense within your story and your I would note weather from a safety perspective specifically, um, right? Making sure that people are aware that the environments look a little different if they're covered in snow, and they look a little different if it is the middle of summer than it is the middle of winter. But if you're going to go out and you're going to have a mainly outside adventure that's meant to be experienced in the middle of winter at the beginning of your story, I would definitely encourage people to be prepared for that. So at on um, the summary section to bring a coat and gloves if it is winter. There's a lot of outdoor activities. Be prepared for those pieces. Um, does that answer your question, or were you hoping for yes? Wanting to make sure that people are aware to be safe again when it comes to weather, just as much as it comes to traffic. Um, cool. Any other questions, then? Alrighty. Actually, at this point, I'm going to throw it over to Emily for a really cool case study out of Seattle.
Yeah, thanks, Tim.
Mhm.
So a really interesting video series. And so they're like little short mini web series. So each episode is literally between like 4 to 6 minutes long. And it's Visit Seattle TV. So Visit Seattle TV was an initiative of the tourism agency there. And they made these amazing short mini web series that were very location based, right? So in the first one, Be There made that. They invited a bunch of visual artists to come to Seattle and create pieces of artwork, which was then chronicled in each episode. And they talked about the places that they visited in Seattle, what that then contributed to the piece of artwork that they built. And it was very location specific as to the things that inspired them that then came into the culmination of those stories at the end, and how those cities influenced the art being made and built the careers of the artists that were making those things. The second one, Open Studio, was a series where they asked some of the city's beloved musicians to take them to one of their hidden natural treasures in the city and talk about why that spot unlocked inspiration for them and their music. And then again, something that was very incredibly powerful is that in each mini episode, they played the song that location inspired, right? And so if you geolocated this kind of content on a platform like Story City, not only could you do these kind of interviews and these kind of insights into the music that you create, the art that you create, but you can also hear a performer perform one of those pieces in the location that's inspired it. So one of our Create-a-thon attendees is really great at doing parody songs. Why would you not go to different locations around your city and do a new parody song at each location that talks about the culture in that particular city and the sites in that particular city and really plays off the location that people are standing in, for example, and perform those in location? The one on the bottom left, Family Style, was a series following 5 immigrant chefs in the city and how they bring their history and their heritage to the city that's allowing them to kind of create a city for the future generation. And so it's very immersive content that allows you to almost do a tour of their food scene. And so you can geolocate those kind of stories where you're talking to people about the different cuisines and restaurants that are in a downtown core, for example. And then the final one was one around diverse graffiti artists. And so it followed 4 graffiti artists and they collaborated on a piece within the Seattle city center. And again, being able to have access to this type of content where you have murals in a particular place and you can talk about what about that location or the city inspired that mural, how it was put together, how it was designed, how it was painted, doing like long capture videos, the time lapses of that all coming together. All of that can be incredibly powerful in a geolocative experience for somebody to enjoy.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Em. And I think that, when we talk about interactive art, I definitely recommend going and listening to a couple of our other mini workshops. Emily did a deeper dive into what that could look like. But if you're looking for more resources into the interactive art space and writing space, I highly recommend looking up what LARPing communities have to offer and the ways that those stories are designed. I recommend looking up what there's a lot of public information about Dungeons and Dragons and what dungeon masters do as far as writing and creating narrative around space and story. Yes, Em.
And then I would give an example around geocaching. So geocaches hide these little caches within areas in a city, and the way that they use the built environment to hide these caches so that people can uncover a puzzle or a clue to be able to like pull them out of a pole or unlock a particular lockbox to be able to get into them. There are some amazing things on geocaching blogs.
Yeah, so those are all public resources that you can continue your journey on how to use interactive space for storytelling. But stay tuned for more of our mini workshops. Cheers, friends.